something and, oh God, it's all me, me, me. It's all about me. Not only that, he even tries to manipulate God with the old, wait a minute, God, you said, you promised. It's like Jacob believed that God owed him something, or that he could control God, or that if he would just quote, and I've told you to pray the promises, and I really believe that you should, but he's using the promise of God to manipulate God. It's a very, very dangerous thing to do. Have you been panic praying in your life in the crisis? Oh God, you've got to help me. Oh God, you said that you would do this. Oh God, you said that you would meet my needs. Oh God. And you start trying to manipulate God. Panic praying is all about trying to take control of the situation. Panic praying is all about trying to take control of the situation. Trying to take control of the situation produces panic praying. Panic praying is all about trying to take control of the situation. Did you get my point? It's not really about trusting God. We pray because we're supposed to pray. And we're really good at it. I don't know if you're like me, but man, some of my best praying has been when I was freaked out. And I was in a crisis and I was panic praying. Oh, some of the most beautiful prayers you've ever heard in your life. I mean, I can lay it on. I even use these and thous when I'm in those times. But it's not about trusting God. It's about trying to take control of the situation. It's about trying to control God. It's about trying to make deals with Him, which leads to the very next dangerous step, and that is scheming. You see, for the Christian, this is our plan B. We have a plan B. You know, we go to God and, oh God, you've got to do this and you've got to help me out. But in the back of our minds, we're hoping that God will come through and save us from the crisis. But if He doesn't, then we feel like we've got to put a plan together. You know, just in case. And we start scheming. So we go from what Jacob has done, look for an escape, then we go to panic praying, and now we've done praying and we feel better because we're okay. I've prayed, and and I feel so much more spiritual now. And what should I do next? One of the dumbest things you can ask. What should I do next? Because if you don't know the answer to that, then God hasn't given it to you yet. And that means stop and wait and listen to the Lord. But no, Jacob says, okay, I prayed. What should I do next? That's exactly what he does. Right after he prays. I mean, there it is, right there in verse 13. It begins with verse 13. He begins scheming. He spent the night there. And then, now he's prayed all this thing. He's talked to God, and he's feeling so much better about it because he's prayed. But look what he does. The very next thing he does. He spent the night there, and from what he had, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. 200 female goats and 20 male goats. 200 ewes and 20 rams. 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys and a partridge in a pear tree. He gets all of this stuff together to try to bribe him. I'm going to give him gifts. Maybe if I give him all these things, maybe he won't kill me. He begins scheming. And he put them in the care of his servants, verse 16 says, each herd by itself, and he said to his servants, go ahead of me. You guys go on, go ahead of me. And keep some space between the herds. Kind of like buffer zone, but he didn't use the word buffer zone. Verse 17, he instructed the one in the lead, when my brother Esau meets you and asks, to whom do you belong and where are you going and who owns all these animals in front of you, then you are to say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he's coming behind us. He also instructed the second and the third and all the others who followed the herds. You're to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. For he thought, I'll pacify him with these gifts I'm sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he'll receive me. Now, he's just gone through this process. He's planned an escape. He's gone through panic praying. And instead of just simply trusting God, he starts scheming. Do you do that? You do that. You get into a crisis, and you start, okay, God, I'm trusting you. I'm depending on you, God. I know what the Word says. I've got to trust in you. I've got to roll my burdens on you, and I'm going to trust in you, God. And that fat guy with bad hair talks about just sitting in your lap and letting you hold me, and so I'm going to do that, oh God, but while I'm doing that, I'm planning B. And we start scheming, coming up with another plan, coming up with another way of doing things. And then what happens is we start planning it, and we don't see things really starting to come together, and we really go into this major crisis mode, and it's found in verses 21 through 23. We give up. All right, that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be. Verses 21 through 23. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. Now, I want you to stop with that verse right there. He's just told these guys, you go on ahead of me, and I'll be right behind you. He sends them on ahead. They're going on to face Esau, who's with his 400 men. Jacob thinks he's coming to kill him. And instead of being behind him like he said he would, he just gives up. Spends the night in the camp. I don't know, what's the point? I'm going to die anyway. There's nothing else I can do about this. It is what it is. Que sera, sera. And that night, verse 22 says, that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and his daughter was with him too, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And after he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. And so I want you to get the picture here. Jacob sent everything he owns, essentially, on ahead. And all he's left is his wives and his children, a few possessions. And he sends them across the river, on ahead, away from him. And he's standing there in this area, on this side of the river, at night, completely alone, all by himself. It's in our darkest moment when all seems completely lost. When we're done with the planning, and we're done with the panic praying, and we're done with the scheming, and we don't know what else to do, that God shows up. That's when it happens. In fact, at first it seemed like there was another problem for Jacob. A man who shows up and begins to wrestle with him. And I'm sure at first Jacob thought, what now? Now? Oh, come on. Do you ever say that to God? You know, I am sure that my first words to God were, come on. When we get to heaven, you know, I'm sure God's going to say, you know what your first words were? Come on. I do that to God. Come on, God, don't you see what's going on here? Don't you understand? And I just, I go through that mood and that mode with God. And Jacob was too. He was just at that point. Jacob wanted God to solve the problem in a way that made sense to him. But God had different plans. Jacob wanted God to fix the circumstances. He wasn't asking God to fix the problem. He was asking God to fix the circumstances. That's generally how we think. We tend to identify the problem by the circumstances. But God had a completely different plan. God was going to bring about a solution, but not according to Jacob's plan. God knew what he was doing. He was going to solve the problem, not just the circumstances. To Jacob, solving the problem would have put an end to the mess, and then he could get on with his life. To God, solving the problem was just the beginning of what he wanted to do. And we'll be seeing this in a few Sundays to come, as we study over the next few Sundays, as we study Jacob. We're going to see how God took what happened here and completely changed, completely revolutionized Jacob's life. This was the turning point in Jacob's life.
Shadow in your presence, no mortal man would dare stand before your throne. Before the by your blood, and it's only